Alright, welcome back to the podcast, everybody, for episode 92. For anybody who's new, this is a podcast, so it's just audio. Ignore the screen, it means nothing. If anybody wants to support the podcast, or just my ability to continue to exist, PayPal and Patreon links are both down in the description below and at the top pinned comments. Now, rare earth metals. Rare earth metal prices have been blasting off into orbit, or at least some of them have. Others have been staying stable, but the ones that have been moving have been jumping up by quite a bit as tech and electronic sales return to relatively normal and then resume growing, obviously, and as electric vehicles or EV sales return to relatively normal and potentially resume growing, and as also numerous renewable energy projects, solar and wind, resume their construction and new ones get propositioned and put forward, demand for rare earth metals resumes growing, and as their inevitable bottleneck presents itself, given that roughly 90 to 92% of the world's supply comes from China, since a lot of the concentrations of them in the ion absorption clays in southern China is just so decent compared to most other deposits and reserves around the world, and also as the primary former other miner, the U.S., constantly shut down its rare earth mining operations off and on, as the bulk of the U.S. rare earths are located in California, and California really doesn't like mining anything. Now, there are other high concentration rare earth areas around the world. They just haven't really started doing anything with them yet. Like, I believe there's some in Australia. There's also a decent concentration in the sands of southern Somalia, but obviously that would present its own problems. So for the moment, the world remains primarily dependent on China, but going down the list, Dysprosium, one of the magnetic rare earths needed in electric motors of all sizes, as well as in wind turbines, and also needed in the magnetic nanograins of computer hard drive disks. Dysprosium, after basically freezing around the 330s for several months, has started going back up over the last couple weeks from 331 up to almost 360, coming in at $357 per kilogram. Uranium has remained pretty stable. Its primary but dying use is in CRT screens of various kinds. Nowadays, its growing use is in various LED diodes, and for the moment, uranium is stable at $43.60 per kilogram. Gallium, the primary LED metal, as almost all of the diodes used for LED lights are a combination of gallium with some other metal, like gallium and indium, gallium and arsenic, gallium and aluminum, gallium and antimony. So gallium is the LED metal, whether you're looking at a screen or your light bulbs or display lights of any kind. You can wonder what else might be combined with it in there, but you can know for certain there's gallium in there. Gallium had dropped down to around 320, however now it's jumped back up really quickly to $366 per kilogram. Hafnium was the only one to really drop. Hafnium being used in nuclear control rods, in the various superalloys used in power generation turbines and aircraft engines, and in more minor amounts in your computer processors, at least in higher efficiency computer processors. Hafnium has dropped a bit from around $1,350 down to around $1,330 per kilogram. Indium, the critical component of indium tin oxide, which is the material for and thus what allows the existence of flat screens. Indium also dropped a bit, actually, I forgot, down from about $311 down to $303 per kilogram. Neodymium, the main magnetic rare earth needed in bulk for electric motors of all sizes, the major type and size growing most rapidly in demand, obviously being EV motors, and also needed in the hundreds of pounds for wind turbines. Neodymium has jumped up in the last week or two from 68, where in the 60s it had been hanging out for many months, and has now lunged up to almost 83, coming in at $82.70 per kilogram. Praseodymium, similar to Dysprosium, needed in electric motors and wind turbines, while needed in much lesser amounts than neodymium. Praseodymium is much rarer than neodymium, so they come out to about usually the same price range. Praseodymium has climbed up not as much, but from 67 up to just under 73, coming in at $72.85 per kilogram. Rhenium, primarily used in the various superalloys of power generation turbines and aircraft engines. Rhenium has stayed relatively flat, presently at $1,456 per kilogram. Holmium, the primary laser metal, as it's needed across many different types of lasers, from factory lasers for both scanning layouts and cutting things, measurement lasers, communications lasers, scanning lasers for computers. Holmium has jumped up recently from about 65 up to just under 80, now at $79 per kilogram. Tellurium, not a rare earth metal, but a rare metal nonetheless. Tellurium's primary non-solar use has been as a very minor, minuscule alloy additive to certain metals, as even in minuscule proportions, like even way less than 0.1%, even that minuscule bit makes the metal much more cuttable. So one of the big ones being copper pipes. And even though the amount used is so minuscule in the alloy itself, obviously just in the world as a whole, there's a lot of plumbing throughout civilization. However, its growing source of demand in present day has been for solar panels as cadmium telluride, as that's one of the films that allows much higher efficiency solar panels. So if you're trying to resolve the solar panel silver demand problem by having higher efficiency solar panels, so you get more energy for the amount of silver you have to use, you are just going to run into other problems, because to get that higher efficiency, you have to use one of the different additional types of even rarer material, like tellurium in the form of cadmium telluride, or even much rarer germanium in the form of, I believe it's germanium arsenide, but I'm not certain. But as various solar power projects have resumed their construction and new ones have been put forward, tellurium demand has resumed going up, and tellurium has climbed a bit from just under 67 up to just under $69 per kilogram, and terbium, the one that has climbed the most, the quickest. Terbium is also needed for electric motors of all sizes and for wind turbines, as well as being needed for solid-state memory devices. Terbium over just the last few weeks has climbed from around $830 or so up to now just under $1,100 per kilogram. And to throw a few other miscellaneous items on at the end, some of just the other regular metals. Lithium, a couple of years back, had made it all the way up to about $20,000 per ton, as demand for EV batteries was growing so fast, but its price crashed once mining capacity expanded really fast in response, as it took a number of years to get a bunch of the mining operations started, but now numerous operations have started up in that massive, like 100-mile wide lithium salt flat up in the Andes Mountains. So lithium had dropped all the way down to only around $6,000 per ton. However, over the last several months, it started climbing back up again and has now made it back up to about $6,600 per ton. Molybdenum, a common steel alloying agent, especially used for added strength for structural steels, buildings, bridges, and the like. Molybdenum had fallen down to around $19 per kilogram, until a couple months ago it started climbing gradually back up again, and previously, when we last mentioned it, it had made it up to $22.15. Now it's made it up to $23.50 per kilogram. Uranium, who'd fallen all the way down to only around $18 per pound, because of most of Japan's reactors being shut down, as well as Germany constantly decommissioning theirs over the course of the last decade or so. Granted, they only started shutting down most of them more recently, and so that has kind of evened out with Japan restarting their reactors after additional tsunami and earthquake safety measures were implemented, and demand has been just tipped over onto the winning side by additional nuclear power plant construction in China, Russia, and a couple in Eastern and Southern Europe, as well as the UAE's nuclear power plant finally coming online. So uranium prices had made it back up at their highest recently to $33 per pound. However, over the last couple months, they've gradually dropped down to presently about $29. And just to end it, rhodium, the rarest of the three primary platinum group metals, has continued going straight up past its record price and set a new one, now all the way up to $16,100 per ounce. But that's it for this one. Thank you everybody for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. You can support me only if you can, but you can support me through PayPal, Patreon. Links are down below. May God bless and protect you all, and I will see you all around next time.